Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and welcome back to another live session on my Declassified Caribbean News and Commentary Network. Now, today we are going into a subject that is rarely discussed openly, yet it may profoundly shape the future of democratic societies, technocracy. Now, when we hear the word technocracy, it often sounds harmless, perhaps even desirable. After all, who would object to experts, scientists, engineers, economists, and technological specialists helping governments make better decisions? But there is a much deeper question we must ask. What happens when expertise stops advising government and begins replacing the government? What happens when decisions traditionally made by elected representatives are increasingly transferred to unelected institutions, algorithms, financial systems, corporations, and technological platforms? And what happens to ordinary citizens when the things they traditionally considered fundamental, political representation, private property, economic independence, and individual freedom, become subject to systems that they cannot vote out, cannot easily challenge, and often cannot even understand and might not be able to see? This is where the debate over technocracy becomes extremely important. Technocracy is not simply about technology, it's about who makes decisions, who controls the resources, and ultimately who exercises power over society. We are entering into an age in which artificial intelligence, digital identification, centralized financial systems, data collection, automation, and algorithmic decision making transforming the relationship between the individual and the state. The great question is whether these technologies will be used to empower human beings or to manage human beings. Will technology remain a tool under democratic control, or could democracy gradually become a facade while real decision-making moves into the hands of technical experts, corporations, institutions, and systems that ordinary people have little ability to influence? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, could the pursuit of efficiency eventually come at the expense of freedom? This afternoon, we are going to examine technocracy, the future of government, the question of private property, the rise of technological control, and what all of this could mean for the sovereignty of the individual. This is not simply a debate about technology, it is a debate about power. Who will govern? Who will own? Who will decide? And most importantly, who will ultimately rule the people? And we need to look at technocracy versus democracy. Who makes decisions when technology and algorithms replace elected officials, digital identity, digital currencies, and financial control? Who controls property in a highly digitized economy, AI and future employment, the growing power of corporations, international institutions, and technology companies? Whether citizens are becoming users of systems rather than owners of them, the fundamental question, who controls the controllers? And this is what we have to ask ourselves. Now, let us look at Tony Blair, and he's an ex-prime minister of Great Britain, and let us examine what he thinks is going to be the future of technocracy, as it were. So let's get into what he has to say and move on with our video. So let us look at Tony Blair and what he has to say here.
Structure, I just want to emphasize how important I think that is, because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure. And many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
The benefits are clear. Digital ID
will make our interactions with each other and with the state faster, cheaper, and more reliable. It will allow us to judge who has a right to be in our country and who doesn't, and so solves one of the major challenges of immigration. Facial recognition can now spot suspects in real time from live video, tracking organized criminals at borders, in public spaces, even helping find missing people. In London, live facial recognition led to 360 arrests by the Met Police between January and October 2024, just in a pilot project. It boosts response times and helps identify suspects quickly in busy places like train stations and events. Live video from body cams and CCTVs can be used to provide real-time advice to officers from a command center or deploy resources to where they're most needed. AI will go even further, spotting crime patterns, guiding patrols, and streamlining decisions. This is where technology, like digital ID, becomes critical. My institute's own analysis shows that introducing this in the UK would save at least $2 billion a year and likely more by reducing losses to fraud, improving tax collection, and better targeting of states abroad. We can ensure that digital ID enhances rather than threatens personal privacy. The key is building trust and designing, with thought and intention, systems that are secure, fair, inclusive, and effective at combating crime and making us all safer.
Given the serious threats that digital ID poses to civil liberties, our data security, and the risk of data being handed over to US tech giants, I'm firmly opposed to digital ID. However, isn't it also a real big waste of money, and shouldn't the government be instead focusing on what's the number one priority of people across the country, which is tackling the cost of living crisis? And wouldn't the money from this better be pushed into that while safeguarding civil liberties?
Okay, so we've heard very carefully what Tony Blair said, right? And he's a part of the globalist agenda. So you need to listen carefully to Tony Blair. And for those of you who don't like your vaccines, you will be actually surveilled. And if you do not take your vaccines, you and the state will be in problem. They're talking about also security, that they'll be able to surveil those who are coming in and those who are leaving the border, and they will determine who is qualified to remain in a country. So this is what they're doing. They're using these technologies not to be able to, improve on our lives, but to manage us as creatures, right, as citizens, which is not going to be freedom. That is what we have to understand, that this technological technocracy is not going to be freedom. Some people are calling it techno-feudalism. That's the word that many are using. Now, many of you think that slavery is going to be in the conditions as we had it before. You must understand that this is going to be a new metamorphosis of what we know as slavery. It doesn't mean, therefore, that people will not be called to work on plantations because they are not actually listening to what government is saying, and government can put them and give them serious work to do. But what you need to understand is that we are going to be enslaved much more than being on a physical plantation. It is going to be that you are going to be surveilled 24 hours. Everything you do, everything you say, and every movement you make will be carefully monetized and monitored rather by your government. Very important that you understand this this type of information. But let us look at a few more clippings of what people are saying about it, because I know some of you are not interested, but you will, when you're enslaved, then it's going to be too late for you to backtrack. Now, let us look at the history between Trump and technocracy. So we're looking at technocracy, and we're looking at what are we having now, democracy or technocracy? Let's listen to what this guy said.
Context of Trump's calls for wanting to purchase or take Greenland and make it part of the United States. Greenland is under the Kingdom of Denmark. So Ken Howry, this Peter Thiel acolyte and associate, is now in a position to help negotiate or try to make that happen if that's really what Trump wants. And the other important piece of that is that if you go back to the original technocrats plan from the 1930s, the original technocracy movement, which said that we shouldn't have the political class, we shouldn't have the business class, that we should have technologists and engineers and the scientific elite basically micromanaging society using the machines, or what we would call AI now. Their original plan called for the tech native North America, and this included the United States, Canada, Panama, and Greenland. So what Trump is calling for is in fact very, very similar to what we heard almost 100 years ago from the original technocrat movement.
I mean, you've talked about it really, and I think if people are sitting there saying, wait a second, this sounds crazy, just look at what's happening right now with the border wall and the idea that we will build some sort of a biometric border wall to keep people out, and it'll be done.
So what we're seeing here is that he's suggesting here that this, when Trump is asking for Greenland, when he's asking for Canada, that he's going to purchase Canada, this is not a new plan. The technocrats have been around since the 1930s, and they have been planning for this takeover of humanity and to plunge humanity in what we call the digital era, in which they will allow technology to control every aspect of our lives, right? We saw that during the pandemic, but the pandemic was just, it pales in comparison to what is going to happen in the future. And I think that some of you are looking at the pandemic and now you've become so acclimatized that they know that you're already slaves, and they are going to increase the temperature as far as slavery is concerned. Now, we're going to look at other perspectives as we go along and make sure that my purpose is to educate and to enlighten and to inform. Whether you want to deal with the subject, that is your prerogative. Now, let us look at what is technocracy, because that's a very important thing for us to look at. What is really technocracy, and for us to understand what they're doing.
And Musk's grandfather was a leader of it, and they did not believe in democracy. They also didn't believe in communism or fascism, but they believed that democracy should be replaced by engineers making all the decisions. Scientists and engineers would make all the decisions. There should be no money. They believe in something basically pretty close to a universal basic income. That in the age of the modern industrial economy, democracy no longer made sense. It was, as they would say, it was just stupid. So I think that that is a big part of Musk's worldview and the worldview a lot of the current crop of tech CEOs. Really, it's just a kind of recycled version of technocracy.
So what they don't want capitalism, as she's suggesting, and she's correct. They neither want capitalism nor do they want communism or socialism. What they're looking for is a technocracy where technocracy is going to become the government. In other words, when you have capitalism and socialism / communism, you have a government. But under technocracy, you won't have a government. What you'll have are experts, scientific experts, engineers, just like during the pandemic, who will tell you what you ought to do, and they will also take away your rights. Once you don't have any government, then you don't have to have any rights. So we're seeing where people are beginning to get seriously disentangled and pessimistic about the role of government, and people are blaming their government for not being effective. Now, what you think that this is something that is good because you are actually fighting against a just government. But they're the ones behind the scenes creating that lack of trust in government and good governance so that they can have a solution, which is to kick all governments out and then essentially have you under the umbrella of a technocratic state. So they have planned this out for hundreds of years, so they know and they understand. So if they can seriously cause you to be pessimistic about government, I'm not saying you shouldn't, and you shouldn't fight against government, but remember now that the people who are behind technocracy are the ones who are behind the lack of efficiency of government so that they can eventually implement what is called technocracy, and people will have to obey technocrats, experts, rather than government. The Constitution will all go through the door and you will not have any rights at all, right? Very important that you understand that. Now, there is somebody here who is giving a very good understanding, an explanation of techno-feudalism will lead to slavery. right? Feudalism is going to lead to slavery. By the way, they're going to take away your land. Okay, so that is what you have to understand. Let me get there to
kind of ideas going on is that all of this technological advance is going to create like a utopia. The reality is the exact opposite, is that all of this technological advance is creating all of this wealth concentrated at the top and driving the most anti-democratic forces plaguing our culture today. And so people out here like trying to hype technology and claim like AI is going to like free up all this time for human beings really aren't paying attention to what's going on. And that, you know, the Ayn Randian kind of libertarian stream of thought that has infected our capitalism and our culture means that all of these technological advances are bent to the benefit of the few at the expense of the many, not the other way around, and that all of this collection of data, all of this stuff is leading us down a dark path. And anybody that can't see that and is out here trying to pretend that like hyping crypto, hyping NFTs, hyping all of these scams that are going to blow up in people's faces. I mean, the crypto collapse will be like the stock market collapse. Eventually, crypto will collapse. It's literally nothing. I mean, it's like the scaling of the internet, like Beanie Babies. You know, so much of what we're dealing with right now is dealing with the culture that has had itself scaled, right? Where there's no such thing as local anymore. Everybody's reach is global due to the internet. And so this kind of manufactured scarcity that drove Beanie Babies, that drives like companies like Supreme, that's what's driving crypto. Eventually that bubble will burst. And so we have to be really, really wary of these kind of technocrat worshipers, the people that believe technology is the answer to everything. Technology is the answer to like changing what it means to be human. And we're already far too down that line. I think one interesting question is, like, did the evolutionary tree always involve us making machines that we would combine with to kind of like extend our lives and make things better? I think it probably did. I mean, when you look at kind of like prosthetics and things that have, you know, adjusted our bodies, medical technology, all of this stuff, we've already been there, pacemakers or whatever. Transhumanism is something very different, but we see all of this. This is not going the way that the kind of utopian crowd believes it will go, right? Like this is going to dystopia. That technology is exacerbating and magnifying problems, not solving them, right? And it's largely not the technology itself; it's who's wielding it, who's driving the R&D, and it's all sociopaths and profit motive, right? Like just money, and self-interests of very disordered human beings in control of the tech without the social skills like empathy to understand what they're doing globally and socially, or they just don't care, that they just want to watch the world burn. And so, you know, if you have people in your life that seem to think like technology is the thing that's going to free us, please understand technology is the thing that's enslaving us. Technology is just another layer of control. Technology is just another tool for the autocrats to wield against the plebeians. And anybody saying otherwise isn't looking at the world clearly.
Okay, and he's making a very good point here, that it's not that we are against technology, or we ought to be or should be against technology. It's just that the way in which it's being used, right? It's not being used to actually improve our lives. In some ways it might. But in many ways than more, we're seeing where the government officials and the private lords that wield power over us are using it to enslave us. They're doing what? They're using the technologies, and what is happening is that people are actually, you know, submitting to it, and they're just saying there is no other way. And what we're looking at, we're not looking at the real enemy sometimes. We're looking at our governments as the real enemy, which they are sometimes. But if we're focusing on these things and we're not looking at how the billionaires are using tools like technologies to control us and to enslave us, then you are going to be up for a great surprise when you have to be enslaved. When you're, I mean, I think we're already enslaved, but we're not yet at that point where you will have to give in everything and submit everything to the system. Very important that you understand that very important point. Now, look at what Andrew Holness is saying about the future of land, particularly in Jamaica, but it's also throughout the Caribbean, because that is what technocracy is all about, controlling land and controlling our natural
giving formal access improves the economy, and that's a positive point. Administration capacity enhancement project is about to change that. Through a partnership with the government of Jamaica and the Korea International Cooperation Agency, we are strengthening the institutional skills, systems, and technologies that will enable Jamaica to administer land more efficiently, more transparently, and more productively. COICA is providing a grant of up to US $9 million. That's approximately 1.42 billion Jamaican dollars. And this will run from 2025 to 2031. On behalf of the government of Jamaica and the people of Jamaica, I express our sincere gratitude to the government and people of the Republic of Korea and to COICA. Korea abolishing absentee landlordship and transferring ownership to those who actually cultivated the land. It was an early, hard-won lesson in a principle that holds across development context, that knowing who owns the land and ensuring that the record reflects the reality of who owns it, but more importantly, that the people who are going to make use of the land in a formal system have ownership of the land. This is the precondition for rapid and sustained.
So, I think Andrew Hollis is saying a lot that many people are not seeing. You think that he's just saying that once you have a formal, ownership of the land, right, means that you're going to be okay. But that's not what he's trying to imply. What he's implying is that to have land means that you have to be productive. To be productive, meaning that you must be doing what government wants you to do, right? So it means, therefore, that if you are having that land and you're not making use of it according to how they think you ought to make use of the land, that land can be seized and taken away from you. Okay, now let us talk about the whole matter of farming. Many people think that farming means that you put something in the ground and it yields. Well, that was what the traditional form of farming. But the fact of the matter is that what the government is trying to do now is to lease your land over to people who practice, for example, the agribusiness. And if you're not in the chemicals and the agribusiness industry, your land could be seized if the government sees that there are corporations who want to be able to feed the nations by actually injecting chemicals into the food. That could be a serious problem. And we're having people in Europe who are saying, farmers in Europe, saying that their lands are being seized because the government suggests that they should not be doing traditional farming or farming according to what the government stipulates. So we have to begin now to understand and to assess what is happening and how we are going to be able to understand what really is happening with this technocracy. And Trevor is saying it's working because the integration is a bit seamlessly done. That is tacking on the digital ID and banking cards to services for access or convenience. What Holness said about land is already happening. Yes, but the other day we saw in which they went into Trelawney in Jamaica and they just evicted. I'm not suggesting now that people need not to go through the legal processes of getting their lands and owning their lands, but the way in which government is now doing things is authoritarian, and they can come and evict you off your land in the wee hours of the morning. I know I presented a video the other day about that, and many of you did not listen to the video because you think that no, my land is mine and no government can take it away from me. Now, by the way, do you know you don't own your land? By the way, we need to do another video on this, that you really are not the owners of your land. In the United States, people know that. They know that they're paying their taxes, and once they can't pay their taxes in the United States, the land is no longer theirs. The government can actually seize your land, and that belongs to the government. So people in the US know that the land is never theirs. People in the Caribbean, however, we think that the land belongs to us. But there are clauses in the Constitution and in the land agreement that the land is not ours. Trevor is saying, check out the tractor protest in the Netherlands yesterday and today. Right. right? But our people are not interested in these areas. They think that they're going to run to see what is happening for the next gossip. And until they realize that when land goes, that is when goes your freedom, right? That is why the slaves wanted a piece of the land. And that is why the United States gave a lot of the whites in the South, an acre of land, and a mule. If you don't own land, or the large majority of the citizens don't own land in any country, it means therefore that you are slaves. Okay, and that is what they are trying to do at the moment. Watch out what they're doing, but many of us are not paying proper attention. More clippings, and then we're going to go into other things, because this is a very important live. Now we have here, we looked at technocracy. What is technocracy? And we in Guyana in the whole matter of, security. Now they're also using land as a way of national security. Let's look at what Hegseth is saying here.
Is part of a new military partnership to tackle narco-terrorists in the Caribbean. Details came from U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth at the America's Counter-Cartel Coalition conference in Panama.
For decades, Jamaica and the United States have a robust partnership on national security with emphasis on intelligence sharing and counter-narcotics operations. Jamaica has joined the new U.S.-led military alliance known as the America's Counter-Cartel Coalition, sometimes called Shield of the Americas. Formed in March 2026, it's described as a U.S.-led multinational security and political alliance formed to combat transnational drug cartels, reduce illegal migration across the Western Hemisphere, and limit foreign geopolitical interference. This was Jamaica's National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang at a recent meeting of the coalition in Panama. TVJ News has not seen any public information from the Jamaican government on the visit. However, the U.S. published photographs on social media and its websites. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth mentioned Jamaica in his remarks.
I want to thank Jamaica for working with the Department of War to create a new military partnership to cripple narco-terrorists that transit through the Caribbean. This partnership will forever change the security environment of the Caribbean.
Jamaicans await details of this partnership. It's important to note, though, that Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Guyana, are part of the America's Counter-Cartel Coalition. The development follows concern about the increased U.S. military presence in the Caribbean and Latin America. Operation Southern Spear, aimed at detecting, disrupting, and degrading transnational criminal and illicit maritime networks, was the overarching program which was used to justify the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
The success of Operation Southern Spear will be transferred to the newly established Joint Task Force Western Hemisphere, the action arm of U.S. Southern Command, to continue the targeting and killing of narco-terrorists that threaten our shared backyard. President Trump does not tolerate free riding. And we're not here for games. When we say we will dismantle the cartels, we mean it. And I know the nations of this coalition feel the exact same way on behalf of their citizens, and will take concrete steps, sometimes risky steps, courageous steps, in partnership, such as reaching status of forces agreements or access basing and overflight agreements.
So we're seeing where the government is using national security as a means of, capturing land. That's what the United States is doing, and that is what our local governments are doing. They're using national security and saying that in order to protect you, we need to protect the borders. But what people don't understand, when they protect our borders, they mean that they want to capture our lands too, right? Because that's exactly what happened in Venezuela. Now the United States owns Venezuela, all because the United States waived a really false pretense, right? That Nicolas Maduro was a person or a national threat to the region and to the United States. and eventually that led to the capture, and now the entire resources of Venezuela, along with the land, belong to the United States of America. So all of this thing about national security, we've got to watch and understand that these are pretenses. Another thing we have to understand, the U.S. military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, right, they are linked to technocracy. Technology controls and the algorithm control this sort of industry. So when they're telling us about national security, we can always think about what? Technocracy. Technocracy that is coming in, and they will be what? Surveilling, and they will also be capturing people's lands or natural resources, and eventually we are going to be enslaved as citizens. Now, let us look at another clipping before I go on to a few articles that I have here to educate you before we end the live. Since you're not interested, but let me just waste my time here for a minute, a few seconds more. While I'm here, let me just finish what I came with and have you decide where you are going if you want to be slaves. I know we love slavery, so why should I even kill myself on the situation? Now, so let's look at the technocrats tied to Vatican bloodline. And this is a very interesting clipping here I found, which we need to look at and to explore, because we think that Musk is behind, he's the only one behind this.
That was the bait. Real architects sit on thrones, wear robes, and drink wine while feeding on children's souls in Vatican crypts. Look, let's name what they won't. The 13 bloodlines that run the world aren't who you think. Orsini, Aldo Brandini, Pallavicini, Medici, Breakspear, Farnese, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Warburg, Hanover, Lee, Bruce, Habsburg. These are not old money. They are Baalic parasitic bloodlines. Ritual sorcerers who hijacked empires and installed mind control systems under the illusion of religion, politics, and finance. Where's their origin point? Venice. The black Venetian nobility ran Babylonian blood cults under Catholic masks. They merged with the Vatican, embedded into the Jesuit priesthood, and exported global slavery through maritime law, trapping you in birth certificates, taxes, and silent contracts with no consent. Venice wasn't a city of romance. It's a sacrificial basin. Why do you think the Pope wears a fish hat? That's not Christian. That's Dagon, a Nephilim water demon. Look, Epstein wasn't a financier. He was a human trafficker for the priest class. He ran blackmail rituals for the elite, orgies timed to celestial gates, using children pre-programmed through MK Ultra satellite nodes. Who funded him? Rothschild-backed banks. He admitted this. Mossad and CIA intelligence mergers. Chabad Lubavitch financiers masked as philanthropists. Why is Ghislaine Maxwell still alive? Because her father, Robert Maxwell, was a triple agent field operator for the Vatican Chabad MI6 Axis. Epstein's Island's temple is a mirror replica of Baal's altars in ancient Tyre. Literally, the owl statues, not for aesthetics, they're invitation gates for entities. Comment, scroll, and I'll send you the full decoded map. Families, cults, islands, bloodlines, oaths, nothing hidden. Everything unveiled. Think about it. Why do the Masons care more about rituals than politics? Because politics was just a front. The true power is ritualized trauma. Here's exactly how they move. Jesuits equal infiltration and education. They wrote your textbook, scripted your news, and flipped your morals through semantic inversion. Freemasons equal gatekeeping plus maintenance grid. Lodges are ritual fields, not clubs. The checkerboard floor, it's a dimensional binding grid. Chabad Lubavitch equals economic controllers of AI, neuroscience, and cloning. They bankroll the puppet governments, own biometric patents, and sit on quantum computing boards. All three serve the Black Sun priesthood. Shadow Vatican that answers to no government, no court, no God you were taught about. They install presidents, they run wars for soul harvest, and they script pandemics not just for population control, but for ritual sacrifice and initiation of mass trauma loops. Look, everything you were taught was a ritual veil. They fed on your doubt. They survived by your silence. But you're the anomaly.
You know, one of the things that I see her, beautiful video, right? And beautiful young lady too. One of the things I'm looking at is that TikTok was supposed to be short videos, right? And it can't captivate people's attention. People's attention is so narrow right now that even a 2 to 3 minute, very intense video cannot really captivate people's attention because something is gone. We're messed up, all right? We are messed up as a society. But she's spot on, as Trevor, you're saying. In Barbados, they introduced a temporary land tax that ended up permanent. And if you don't keep it clean or pay those taxes after a certain time, it becomes government owned. So much for land being an asset. And by the way, I'm hearing also that in Jamaica too, that not land now, water, that because they're now suggesting that we're facing a drought, that if you are seen watering your garden or your lawn at your house, that they can come, the government can come and actually imprison you. So there are rules now, there are laws by government that you can be imprisoned. You can go to jail right there on your own property, mowing your lawn, not mowing your lawn, but watering your garden or watering your what do you call it, your grass. Okay, so that is something that we have to understand. We're not free, and laws are being set up in such ways, and they'll use drought, they'll use national security, they'll use climate change, and many other things to take away your rights. And somebody asked on a TikTok video, so are you going to tell me, Mr. Holness, Dr. Andrew Holness, that I'm buying my water to water my garden or to water my grass, and you have that right to imprison me? And the answer is yes. Yes, he has the right, even though you might have bought that water. He is going to use that you are actually wasting water, and so he has all rights to put you in prison. So this is where we are heading. This is where we're heading, and our Caribbean citizens are fast asleep because they're too gossipy. Now, we have that TikTok video is really spot on, and that's why I selected it. You don't know how much effort I put into presenting these materials I'm putting to you. You think I'm just putting up some TikTok, not you, Trevor, I'm talking to the audience. I put a lot of effort into selecting the right ones and synthesizing them so that I can come to you and build the case for you to see that we are living in some very serious times. But I think most of us are joking. Yeah, it's not fair that all of this ritual magic can have the rest of us decent people enslaved like this. Yes, and by the way, Marie, there's a gentleman, I think I've already told you guys, called Gabriel Estevan, and he was a Satanist. He was in that sort of orientation, and he said every football game, every carnival, every Olympics, and all of these major things that we celebrate and we think is so good, that you have to have rituals in terms of killing children, human sacrifice. So when we are hearing about Epstein and we think Epstein is the guy, and after he has been, killed, then everything is going to be okay, that is not so, because it is deeply enmeshed in the system in which we live. And we often, we support it. So if we're watching the Olympics, if we're watching the recently held World Cup, and all these major events, even some of the movies that we watch, they have to have human sacrifice. And he was there, and he used to go to the ceremonies before the matches and the games would begin. Okay, so a lot of what we're seeing in the world, we sometimes don't like what we see, but behind the scenes, if we only know, we would not support these games. We would not. Would refuse to watch them. Would refuse to give them the time of day. And if we were not giving them the time of day, they could not earn money. We are the ones, and that is why we just can't say our governments are wicked. We too, if we're properly analyzed, are wicked. We don't want to hear the truth, and when we hear the truth, we reject it, and then we end up in the problems that we are currently under. Now, there's an article coming from PBS about Hegseth, who was telling us about, national security. And the question is asked here, how Hegseth's controversial religious views could affect military leadership. President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and he's now the Secretary of Defense, has faced an allegations, or he's Secretary of War, as it were. He's the Secretary of War, right? Allegations of sexual misconduct, excessive drinking, and financial mismanagement, all of which he denies. So he has been, all these allegations against him for sexual misconduct, excessive drinking, and he's my age. I think Pete Hegseth is about 48, and he's looking very old, right? Excessive drinking and financial mismanagement, all of which he denies. Laura Baron Lopez and Brad Onishi discuss something else that's drawn scrutiny, the influence of Hegseth's religious beliefs and how they may impact his leadership at the Pentagon. Now listen to what they're saying. Hegseth has faced allegations of sexual misconduct, excessive drinking, and financial mismanagement, which he denies. Now, Pete Hegseth has said faith became real for him around 2018, years after his service in Iraq and Afghanistan. He went on to write a number of books and has made frequent appearances on conservative podcasts and shows in which he discusses his Christian ideology. But people don't know that he is a Catholic, right? So in other words, they should be saying his Catholic ideology. Those writings, comments, and even Hegseth's tattoos have gotten increased attention in the weeks since Trump's announcement. For more on what's known about Hegseth's belief and how they may influence his leadership at the Pentagon, we're joined by Brad Onishi, who studies religious extremism and co-hosts the podcast Straight White American Jesus. Now, they're saying here, let's start with Hegseth. He has said explicitly in his book, in his 2020 book, he wrote, "We don't want to fight." This is what he's saying. "But like our fellow Christians 1,000 years ago, we must. Our American crusade," he's saying our American crusade is not about literal swords, and our fight is not with guns yet, unquote. So what Hegseth is doing around the world, he's launching what is known as a crusade. Now, what did they do during the Crusades? It was the Vatican's attempt to take away and to get rid of the Muslims and for him to capture Jerusalem. Do we see the same thing happening now where eyes are on the Middle East and they're wondering what in the dickens is happening there in the Middle East? Well, Hegseth is saying to us that he believes in the new Christian crusade. And the Catholic crusade, you can go and research and you'll see during the Catholic crusades what happened there. Now, another thing is this very important article coming from Politico today. Politico newspaper today, and this is a secular United States newspaper. This has nothing to do with any religious paper. Now listen to what Politico says here. House lawmakers visit Vatican to discuss AI and meet the Pope. Now, this is a bipartisan effort. Both the Democrats and the Republicans alike are doing it. The visit comes as the Catholic Church, including Pope Leo XIV, has increasingly focused on the rapidly developing technology. Now, listen to what the article says. A bipartisan House delegation met with top Vatican officials on Wednesday to discuss artificial intelligence during a visit that briefly included Pope Leo XIV, according to two people with knowledge of the trip granted anonymity to disclose details of the private meetings. The delegation's visit, which has not been previously reported, included 8 lawmakers. How many? 8 lawmakers from Congress, and was coordinated by the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. It was what? It was coordinated by the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, the person said. Committee member Representative Dan Newhouse and California Representative Ro Khanna, the panel's top Democrat, led the trip. A spokesperson for the committee declined to comment. A spokesperson for the committee declined to comment. In an interview confirming the visit, Khanna said the topics of discussion included religious freedom. Now, this is a secular Congress. What is supposed to be a secular Congress, and they're going to the Vatican, both from the Republican, and many of you think that the Democrats are non-Christians and they're fighting against this religious Democrats. But I want to tell you that at the leadership level, both sides are religious. Said the topics of discussion included religious freedom, AI's economic and geopolitical risk, as well as broader ethical and existential implications. This is coming from the Politico. It's centered on 2 key principles: human dignity and equality. Human dignity means that human beings need to be responsible for any key decisions involving health, involving finances, involving individual freedom, involving public service. Now listen to what they say. The Silicon Valley Democrat, so the Silicon Valley is also controlled by whom? By the Vatican. The Silicon Valley Democrat said that in preventing automation from causing mass unemployment and ensuring AI cannot be used to exclude people from social services. They're all talking, but you know that they're doing the opposite of what they're saying. Kana said it also means guarding against a concentration of power in which a few billionaires can make decisions about data and algorithms. The Vatican did not respond to a request for comment about the meeting. How can they? Because they do everything in secrecy. But Pope Leo has taken a special interest in the technology and used a May encyclical to call on countries to safeguard humanity as AI develops, warning that the technology could deepen inequality. So at least he's speaking the truth here. Fray the social fabric and erode moral responsibility if it doesn't have ethical guardrails. Now, who is going to give that ethical guardrails? The Vatican. There's no one else to do it because he's considered to be the moral authority of the world by all U.S. presidents, all of them, from Barack Hussein Obama to Reagan, to all of them. They have dubbed the Pope as the moral authority of the entire world, particularly here in the West. Congress, meanwhile, has introduced dozens of AI bills and held several hearings, but has failed to agree on a comprehensive federal framework for governing the technology. So guess what? They can't agree in Congress, right? The representatives in Congress can't agree. So who is going to agree for them? The Pope. The Pope of Rome is going to agree for the officials in Congress who can't come together and say what are the ethical standards that should govern technology and AI. So we see where they're heading. And this is a secular Congress, or what should be a secular Congress, going all the way to the Vatican to meet with the Pope of Rome. I let you decide that. I won't tell you. You have to connect the dots. That's what I'm trying here to do as much as I can, connect the dots for you. Stephen is saying, what was the name of that movie about child trafficking and was basically ignored by the media and Hollywood? Well, if they're ignoring that movie, be therefore, well, we know that Hollywood is a part of that trafficking and child sacrifice. Do you know that? And for people who have come out of Hollywood, they will tell you horror stories of Hollywood. Once you're in Hollywood, all of the sex and what they do there, that's why everybody's sleeping with everybody. They're just not good people, right? They're not decent, law-abiding people in Hollywood. They give us that illusion. And that is why are we even watching them? Why are we even watching Hollywood when we know what they are about? That they are terrible. They're pagans, as it were. They're demons. And yet we sit and we watch them and they make money from our views. Right? So the fact of the matter is that we support the system. And that's what I'm saying to you. Whether directly or indirectly, we support the system that is enslaving us. And that's the more we are aware of them, then we begin to what? To amend our ways. Years ago, there was a Barbadian, and he from the States, right? Well, he was living in the States. And he said that when he left Barbados and he started to work for one of those top banks in the United States, I think that was in New York where he lived. I forgot the name of the bank, but it was a top bank. And when he learned about what they were doing, what the same bank that he was, working at and being paid well, he left because he realized that having some values, he could not associate with that bank. How many of us would do that? And that's what I'm saying, that if we are serious about corruption, we also have to look at some of the places that we work for, okay, and what they are associated with. And this is what we want to say here. The same thing that is repeating itself, absolutely. That's what it will never end. And then we might need to re-examine what it is to be a Christian. It seems to be murder, 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 murder. Absolutely, what it means to be a true Christian. Just like we have to examine what it means to be a true scientist, because scientists also murder, murder, murder. Right? That when we look at what is happening with the drug world, right? What happens with the drugs that come out of these scientific institutions, just go and read these books and you realize that they are not given to people for the most part to improve their health, but to deplete their health. Okay? So everything coming out of education, science, all of these things is murder, murder, murder. But does it mean that science is not important? No. It means that true science is what we ought to look for. In the same way that if we have true religion, that will elevate us and give us some understanding of who we are. Now we have Sound of Freedom, or that's the movie that Stephen was talking about. And then we have here, it's a biofilm on Jim Caviezel, a former government agent who quit his job to rescue children from sex traffickers in Colombia. Now, we must understand that children are innocent. In the same way that, gone are the days when we had the AIDS scare, right? And we heard coming out of Africa some foolishness about if you have, intimate relationship with a young child, that it could cure you. And you really wonder who these sort of ideologies came from. And it could be that it came from the top. Because if the top is trafficking children and doing with them what we know they're doing, then it means, therefore, that they could have inculcated in many Africans, in their heads, that if you have intercourse with somebody, a virgin child, it means, therefore, that you could be cleansed of AIDS. Now, these are thinking that probably are still around, rather, in modern day Africa and other parts of the world. Now, Trevor is saying people keep turning their eyes to corruption to keep their salaries similar to all the now temporary contract roles in government, directly and indirectly playing their part in crime against humanity. Yes, I think that many of us, if we should ever study the system, would be repulsed by the system and would understand that there is nothing that is not so part and tied to the system, including academia, including the very universities that we go to and we support. They are tied to the system. Trevor, to sleep at night, they accept it as life. Somebody got to live and somebody got to die. And that is true. And I think as human beings, we are just inherently selfish. Look at the other day, I was showing you what happened to the people in Trelawney in Jamaica, and many of you just left. You just left. No sort of sympathy to say that this could be me, that the government could come to my home and bulldoze down everything I have and I will have nothing, as the WHO says, the World Economic Forum, right? The World Economic Forum say that we'll be happy, we'll have nothing, and you will be happy, okay? And these people, I'm not suggesting here that I am for lawlessness and, and disorder, and disorderly society. But I'm saying to you, we don't have any compassion as human beings. And if it's not happening to us now, we don't feel like we should have a conversation on the topic. And that is something that we need to change. And then when our governments behave very rude to us and they do wicked things to us, then we begin to cry and we want sympathy from others. And we don't have sympathy for others when they are going through their rough deal. This is what I'm saying. So when people are telling me that, oh, we're lovely and our governments are wicked, I'm saying that our government reflects the society. The government reflects the values of the society. And we get what we really deserve, for the most part. I'm not saying you and I, because there's always a minority who will stand up for that which is right. But the majority, we get what they deserve. Let me put it that way. The majority get what they deserve. The government that they deserve. The technocratic government, which is coming to enslave us, we deserve it. because of our lack of awareness. Now, the World Economic Forum, as we just spoke about that, the human measure in the age of AI, what Europe can learn from Pope Leo the 14th rather, first encyclical. So the World Economic Forum is telling us, and we would think the World Economic Forum is also secular, but it is also religious. In 1891, Pope Leo the 13th published Rerum Novarum, the foundational text of modern Catholic social doctrine. By the way, if you're talking about social doctrine, it always refers to the Catholic teachings, right? Written amid the upheavals of the Industrial Revolution, it sought a path between laissez-faire capitalism and revolutionary socialism, insisting that economic transformation could not come at the expense of human dignity. 135 years later, Pope Leo XIV has chosen similarly transformative terrain for his first and much-awaited encyclical In Magnifica Humanitas. The leader of the Catholic Church turns his attention to artificial intelligence, digital power, and the concentration of technological authority. Okay? The message of the letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church is clear. Technological progress cannot be judged solely by efficiency, productivity, or market value. It must ultimately be measured by its impact on the human person and the common good. The common good, right? The Pope always talks about the common good. And that's what they mean when they want to impoverish you. For political and business leaders, particularly in Europe, the encyclical is more than a religious document. Let me repeat that. For political and business leaders, particularly in Europe, the encyclical is more than a religious document. It is a strategic intervention in one of the defining debates of the century, how societies can remain human in an era increasingly shaped by algorithms. Right? Because that's what we're living in now. We're living in an algorithmic age where decisions are made by algorithm, not by human beings, but by algorithm. And whether the algorithm is right, moral, wrong, it doesn't matter. The algorithm has said it, and you've got to deal with it. There's no question that that is what needs to be actually discussed. The historical parallel matters. In 1891, the Pope Leo XIII confronted the social consequences of mechanization, the condition of the working classes. Today, Leo XIV confronts the social consequences of cognition itself becoming partially automated. The Pope explicitly frames AI as a transformative force comparable to the Industrial Revolution. So we're moving now into what? AI revolution, warning that societies are once again entering a period in which economic gains risk being concentrated while social costs are widely distributed. By the way, let me ask you something. Did the United States Congress, the members of Congress, when every president of the United States is elected, do they go to Israel to get their, I guess, their benediction and to be blessed and to bow down to Netanyahu? Do they go to bow down to Netanyahu, or who do they go to bow down to? The Pope of Rome. Every president. Before the president of the United States is even Smith dinner to be blessed by the candidate, to be blessed by the Pope, by the Cardinal of New York, before they can contest the election on that particular election day. Okay, so when we're looking at these things, we are looking at them from a critical perspective, looking at documents that are not coming from church documents now, they're coming from the political, it's coming also from the World Economic Forum, which is telling us that whenever the Pope, publishes an encyclical, we should not just look at it from a religious perspective, but it has much more than religion in it. It is what guards, what the leaders of the world, including US politicians, do right there in Congress. Okay, so for the people living in Congress who think that it is just the politicians who are guiding the nation, you've got to be careful. You've got to understand that behind the scenes, there are other powers of which you are not aware who are actually steering the nation in the direction that they want the nation to be steered in and not what you would like. So you might be looking at who is going to win the next coming election, the election coming up now, the midterm elections, right? Your eyes are on that. Who is going to win? The Democrats, the House, and the Senate, and all that nonsense. That is only staged to entertain you because it has nothing to do with what the outcome of the United States actually is. The agenda is still the same. Yes, they do. Cynthia McKinney, she talked about this before she was ousted. Yes. So what we need to understand is that we are living now in an era of technocracy where these experts, these so-called experts, are telling us that our government will have to go, right? So the purpose is not to have government. And that is why you're on lives and you're trying to, complain about Miss Mia Motley and Andrew Holness and Kamala Persson-Bissessar. At the end of the day, the powers that be don't want them, would like them to go right now if they could. But they're waiting for the right moment. Just like the pandemic, they're waiting for the right moment in which to what? To absolve all governments and have experts, okay, the technocrats, to run our government and to tell us what we need to do. And in that society, we won't have any rights because government will no longer represent us, the people. Okay, we will no longer elect them. And we never elect them in the way, right? Because they select them and we elect whom they selected, right? So we have never selected them. But the fact of the matter is that the Constitution sort of helped us to gain some form of rights. What they're trying to do right now is also to ban the Constitution and to have the technocrats take over everything, right? So they will be able to do with you and with me whatever they desire. You have to pledge your allegiance to Israel. Well, we understand that is not Israel. You're pledging your allegiance to the Pope. You're pledging your allegiance not to Israel, but to the Pope. They didn't go to Israel, as we just read, to go to get the blessings of AI. They actually went to the Vatican. He's the one that writes encyclical all the time. I've never seen an encyclical coming from Israel that tells the world what they need to do. But the Vatican does that, right? And for the entire world, not only for Europe and for America, but for the entire world, including Africa. So yes, Israel is not the person that we're pledging allegiance to. We're actually pledging allegiance to the Pope of Rome, to Rome itself, because all roads lead to Rome. Right? Israel is just being used as, as a tool and a way of, remember now that if you read the history, when has the Jews not been a problem? Every time is the Jews. Inquisition, Spanish Inquisition is the Jews. The French Inquisition is the Jews. During Nazi Germany is the Jews. And who was behind all of that? The Pope. The Vatican was behind all of those. French Revolution, Spanish Inquisition, okay, and all of the plots there in England of poisoning prime ministers, the Vatican was behind it. World War II and Nazism, the Vatican. Hitler's Pope, right? Hitler's Pope. Read that book and you'll see how the Vatican was very involved in World War II and the rise of Hitler, Mussolini, all of those, and the one Franco, Spanish, Franco in Spain. All right, all of these major wars and controversies, the Vatican was involved in it. Even the Civil War. Go and read also the Civil War in the United States. The Vatican was involved. In fact, the Vatican wanted the South to win. Did you know that? The Vatican was on board and wanted and was working hard to get this South, right, to win the Civil War because they didn't want Black freedom. Right? They didn't want it. And they wanted to tear the US apart so that the Vatican would have gone and taken over the United States of America and run it as a feudal state. Right? So this is history. Just go and read the book 50 Years in the Church of Rome. It's accessible online. 50 years in the Church of Rome by Charles Chiniquy, and lots of other people have written about it. They've written about the Vatican's, influence on the murder of many of the United States presidents, Abraham Lincoln, and including not FDR, but the one in the 1960s, the John F. Kennedy. All of these things, they are there accessible. Not the Zionists who did it. Actually, the Vatican was behind all of these things. Those were her words, not mine. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so people are saying that, but because that is what people are actually saying, but we have to now begin to do further research, deeper research on who really is the power structure. Now, remember too that when we see people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and these people, sometimes we're tempted to think that they are the ones who control. But as the lady here was saying in the clip from the TikTok video, she was saying that the bloodline families, these 13 families that rule the world, or how many of them, that they go right back to also the Vatican. Right? They have bloodline, they go right back. The Medicis and all these people go right back to the Vatican. So when you look behind the Elon Musk and the Bill Gates of the world, they are just the face of the system, right? But they are not the system. They're just the face, what we see. So we see Israel now. We see Zionism as the face of the system, but it is not the system. It is not at the highest level of the system, and that is what we have to understand. So we know the Bill Gates don't control he doesn't run the world, and neither does Elon Musk. And tomorrow, if the people, the powers that be, want them out, they will kick them out. And that's what happens. If Bill Gates doesn't behave himself, they will kick him out. If he does not do what they order him to do, they will also kick him out, because he is not where the power center stops. Okay, and that is what they need to understand. Then we have Marie saying, however, the Vatican may be controlling Netanyahu, but he's still a psychopath for agreeing to do what he does. Absolutely. All of them are psychopaths. If to follow anything that the world is doing, whether you're following the Freemasonry or you're following the Illuminati or you're in the Satanic order, yes, it takes a psychopath to do it. Right? It does take a psychopath. Even the pandemic, what happened during the pandemic, it took a psychopath, the likes of Fauci, to do what he did. But he was actually following the orders of the Jesuits, because he was Jesuit trained. And for those of you who understand Jesuitism, you have to follow your master. In fact, do you know what the Jesuits say when they're training them? That you are a corpse. It means that you're dead. Dead in the sense that whatever I tell you, you don't have any mind to think for yourself. So Fauci doesn't think for himself. Do you know that? As brilliant as you think he is, he does not think for himself. He has to act like a dead corpse, right? And just follow orders. That's how the Catholic Church runs. You don't question. And that is why you had Europe for thousands of years in darkness. Not one scientific knowledge in that country for about 1,260 years. Right? Can you imagine? Because the Catholic Church reigns supreme. Wherever she reigns, you can't question. You acknowledge, and you must not question whether it's religious, scientific, political, economic. This is what she says, and you've got to follow her diktats. This is how she behaves, and that is why we have what we call the Protestant Reformation, which sort of, it carved out a world that was not perfect and is still not perfect, but allowed us to some degree to challenge and to critique and to ask questions that people were not accustomed to doing in the old world. So we can say all we want to say about the West, for example. The West, in its right iteration, apart from slavery, and that's what slavery did to the West, it destroyed it. But at the end of the day, we can't say that we had that same liberty in Africa. We can't say that, because people had to do what the masters told them to do. Authorities, not master, but authorities tell them to do. This is the world we live in, and we can't do a world that is not. We can't do a world that is not. But Netanyahu is a psychopath, absolutely. He is a Satanist, and you have to be Satanist to be at that level. You've got to. But I'm just saying to you, all of the world leaders, I'm currently reading one of the guy's book there. What's his name? the one that we had yesterday, the guest that we had yesterday on the program, that is Zagami, Leo Zagami's book, and he was talking about the guy there, the Muslim leader there. What's it called? The Lalai or the Lai? Forgot his name, but he's saying that this guy that you would have thought is a Muslim and somebody who is against and the West and what the West is doing, he is actually tied to the CIA. Right? So a lot of things we're seeing in the world looks from, when you look at them, it looks literal, like that is what is happening. But behind the scenes, that's not what is happening, because we have two things. We have one that is open and one that is happening behind the scenes. And they know that. And that's why they call themselves the enlightened ones, because they're seeing from what is happening behind, and we are just looking at we're seeing at face value. So they say that there are the enlightened ones, and that is why they have their secret societies. And they behave as if they are superior to us, because we're just the ones just watching TV and thinking that that is the news, right? When the news is deeper than what we are actually seeing, right? So we have to understand what they're doing so we can be always informed. So this is what technocracy is, guys. It's about government, no government, the eradication of government, and governments will no longer be in our lives. What we will have are just technocrats who will control us and who will tell us what we need to do or face the consequences, including death. Okay, including death. So where do we go from here? Any questions? Any more comments? This is what I had for this afternoon. Do we have any more comments? We're looking at technocracy, end of governments, control of property, and the rule the people. That's what they're going to do, to rule you. And they're going to rule you with an iron fist. All right? That is what technocrats do. Without law, they will do it. They will kill, because there won't be the laws to say that they can't. Right? They'll make the law. In fact, they'll make the law that it is legal to unalive you. Okay, so you think that, one of the things that we need to understand, without laws and human restraints, the human heart can be brutal, If the human heart, let us say, for example, somebody slights you, and you know that if you get rid of that person, the law will not hold you accountable, many people will do it. If you have been slighted the wrong way, right? People do it. Because they realize that if they do it, they don't feel like anybody's going to hold them accountable. The only reason many of us restrains ourselves from doing what we think we won't do are laws. Because we think that if we should do it, we're going to go to prison, the person's going to call the police, the cops, and the cops will come for us. That's the only reason. Laws. Because human beings are like that. If we don't have laws, then we do whatever we want to do. Then Stephen is saying, I believe the Secretary of State did his speech about a month ago. No more laws, right? No more laws. But their laws, right? It's not laws for them, Well, it's not laws for us, but laws for them. So, laws for us and not laws for them. That's what I should say. Remember now that during the pandemic too, they made laws for us, but the laws were not applicable to them. So they could go and dance, and they had their parties, and they went and look at Fauci. Fauci was at games, right? Where he was not social distancing, and he was not even wearing any masks. Yet he was telling us that we should wear masks, and if you don't wear a mask, and if you do not social distance, then you're going to catch a virus, and that you're an evil person. At the same time, he wasn't doing it. So yeah, it's laws for us, draconian laws for us, while their laws will be laxed and they can do whatever they want to do. So this is where we're heading, the society for which we are treading on. We have started, the pandemic started it, I think probably before too, but more so the pandemic, it became more visible. And I think that eventually we are going to wind up getting there. I mean, how long are we going to be living in any free world? I don't think it's more than 2 or 3 years. I don't think so. I think that they're fast tracking things. And very soon, we won't be able to say things. Algorithms are going to control everything we say and do. Look at YouTube. When are you? Oh, you can't use the word K. You have to say unalive. What is this control of people's speech? Shouldn't that be? If somebody dies, it's the person dies. You know, what can we say? Now, if you are here trying to say you are going to unalive someone, then that is what they should, you know, that is when they should probably try to censor you. But the fact of the matter, if you're using a word that has a meaning, and we know what the meaning stands for, and you are not trying to do that to anyone, why are they trying to censor what we say? And people just take it for granted until eventually we can't even say what we want to do. And our words will no longer represent the reality. Our words will be controlled that it will represent their reality. Right? And this is where we are actually heading to. So we'll be delusional. Because if you're speaking in a way in which your words don't convey the reality, then you are delusional. So they are making us into transhumans who are going to be what? Delusional people. And we will accept it. Any other comment? Any other response? This is a very deep subject, you know, guys, and this is something that we should be taking very seriously, the whole matter of technocracy that the governments are actually trying to impose on humanity, not only here in the West, but the entire world is going to be facing a technocratic government. The Chinese already have that blueprint, and they are happy with it. The Chinese people are happy with that sort of technocracy. Some of them, not all of them, right? But most of them are quite happy because they're doing well. And how is it that they have allowed a Chinese population to be, you know, fairly wealthy in terms of their economic stance while they're surveilling them? They're not looking at what the government is doing because economically they feel that they're alive and they can have their gadgets, right? Their robots do their work and they have their computers and their cell phones. And that is how we are also living here in the West. But the West used to be different, where we were more concerned about freedom than consumerist, you know, technologies or whatever. Now we find ourselves that we are more about convenience than about our liberties or freedoms. It means nothing to us anymore. Okay? Until we lose them, it means absolutely nothing. And that is what I don't understand. That we are here in this world now, and years ago, we would be complaining about the Chinese and, you know, the fact that we don't want our nations to be ending up like that. But oh no, it's okay now because they're doing well economically and we're not as well doing as well as they do. So yeah, we can trade some freedom for economic prosperity. Okay? And what happens when we lose our freedom? You have nothing. Right? You can have all the economic prosperity if you have freedom. If you don't have freedom, rather, you have nothing. You're a slave. You're a slave. But I guess that's what we want. We want slavery. Slavery looks now appealing, appetizing, and we are willing to trade slavery over. As you know, what his name? The one 1984. He said that freedom is what? Is slavery. We think freedom is slavery, and that's what it is. Now, any other questions, comments? Before we go, I think this was a very useful conversation we need to have. And in fact, we should be having this every day. Were you more interested? This conversation should be had every day because we're having a countdown to slavery. And it's going to be techno-feudalism. Well, guess what? We're not serious in the region, so why should I worry myself? Thank you so much for joining, and we will have another live discussion sometime soon. Bye.